Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe is an event by TC Jewfolk. This is a live on the Bema show featuring 12 women telling their true Jewish stories that have a thread to being or having a mamala. The stories include good, bad, funny, sad, hilarious, and golden moments. I'm your host, Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk, and this is the Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe podcast. Before we hear from this week's storyteller, this week's episode is sponsored by Heilicher Minneapolis Jewish Day School, the Twin Cities K-8 independent school of choice for families who want academic excellence in a nurturing Jewish environment. Heilicher education promotes a lifelong love of learning and global engagement. Rigorous academics are masterfully integrated with Hebrew and Judaic studies and emphasize critical thinking across all disciplines. Heilicher graduates leave prepared for success in high school and beyond. Schedule a tour and learn more at hmjds.org. You'll be home at Heilicher. This week's storyteller is Stacey Dinner-Levin. Stacey is the mother of 4 boys, now adults, the eldest of whom has autism. For over 25 years, she's worked with children with disabilities, including Pacer Center's Count Me In program, where she wrote several scripts. Her play Autistic License was named one of 2007's 10 Best Plays by the St. Paul Pioneer Press and was featured in American Theater magazine. Autistic License was remounted for film and won Best Educational at the IFFF in 2010. Stacey lives in Minneapolis with her husband Michael, her son Jordy, and the world's strangest dog, her Chinese-crested Birdie. Stacey, great to see you. Thank you for being here. What was it that brought you to the Stories from the Tribe show?
Okay. I had been involved for the last few years with Listen to Your Mother, which is a storytelling venue in the Twin Cities. And Galit Breen is part of that production. And she has branched out and did this whole Stories from the Tribe thing, which is like amazing. And so, I followed her here.
So you've been through this type of storytelling exercise, both the exercise of writing it and then going out and performing or telling your story in front of an audience. What made this time different?
I think what was really unique, obviously, is that this was exclusively Jewish women telling Jewish stories. And there is, a real sense of shared community in that, and a different kind of, I guess the word I would use is maybe a safe space, especially in this day and age, but also just in this day and age, a real need for us to gather and tell our stories. It's really important.
For sure. What would you tell somebody who's thinking about auditioning for the show as we look to move this into year 2?
Yeah, well, I would encourage anybody who's interested in doing it to do it. I mean, I think that, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
We all have a story, right? And I would say maybe not necessarily everybody is a storyteller, but you don't have to necessarily be the greatest writer or the most confident speaker to do something like this. You just have to have a story that will touch your audience.
And I think the amazing thing about watching you and the other storytellers on the Bema when this happened back in June at Bethel was that it was the authenticity behind it, is that you're not professional actors.
Right.
You're telling your story from your heart.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's a really special performance venue for, not just us as storytellers, but for the audience, because people go out, they're used to seeing professional actors with memorized scripts, and this is a different kind of thing. It's refreshing, I think, to have people. It's sort of like the old days of sitting around the campfire and sharing stories.
Because you've done this sort of thing a few times with Listen to Your Mother, were the nerves the same for you, or is it different because of the venue and the people you're telling with and the type of stories you're telling?
I think it's always the same for me.
Okay.
Call it Jewish anxiety. It is, I mean, for me, that's what it is, but I think that that's good too. Yeah, I never want to be in a place where I'm overconfident, and so you just don't know. And Listen to Your Mother has sort of a strong following of regular people.
Right.
This was new, and so you don't know what kind of audience you're going to encounter,
That's true. I mean, every audience is going to be a little bit
Right,
different.
right. They turned out to be, also very loving and warm and welcoming. But, you don't know if it's going to be like a night at the Apollo or something.
Well, I mean, you definitely hope for the best going in, right?
Right.
But like you said, you never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You never know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, you just hope for the best.
That's right. What do you want people to know about your story before they hear it?
Let's see. What do I want them to know about the story? I would say that I tend to have a knack for finding myself in situations that seem kind of impossible, but yet I seem to have some internal magnet that gets me into these kind of predicaments. I also think, it's a real story about the strength of Jewish identity and nonconformity as a minority in a bigger world, and what it means to take a stand.
Well, it is a fantastic story. So we're looking forward to hearing your story, Preaching to the Choir Director.
Miss Hansen was the choir director at my son's public school, and she moonlighted as the youth choir director at her church. Miss Hansen was a genius at producing stage spectacles that would rival anything you saw on Broadway. Tornadoes with flying cows, glow-in-the-dark costumes, and armies of the Mouse King brought to life by her direction. I was in awe of her talent, so it was disappointing when she and I bumped heads over the holiday concert. My son Ryan came home complaining that one of the songs in the show was "O Holy Night." The lyrics in this song refer to Christ as the Savior, so Ryan chose not to sing the words, which resulted in his peers bullying him. My involvement with school productions did not go beyond attending them, but this crossed a line. I emailed Miss Hansen explaining songs that made children declare devotion for a particular God or Savior were not allowed in a public school. She pushed back, claiming that she was merely teaching the children diversity and that there were songs from all traditions in the program. Now, I am an advocate for songs from all traditions, but teaching diversity is about learning and appreciating the customs of others. It never requires one to utter words that would make one feel they are violating their own beliefs. After my exchange with Miss Hansen, Ryan said the song remained in the program, so I contacted the principal. He confirmed that only secular music was acceptable in a public school. He promised to speak with Miss Hansen, but he never did. I learned after the fact that there had been an afternoon performance for the student body. Ryan said he participated fully in the concert, but when it got to the song of issue, he stepped off the bleachers, off the stage, and sat in the audience. I never gave him any instruction to do this, nor did I want him to be placed in such a position. But boy, was I proud. And although Ryan was a year out from his bar mitzvah, I felt that step off the stage was his first step into adulthood. We kept Ryan home from the evening performance in order to protect him from being put in that situation again. Now, you may think this is where my story ends, but you would be wrong. 1 year later, I was invited by the Illusion Theater to write a short skit about the meaning of Hanukkah. The artistic director wanted to offer an alternative to the standard Christmas productions in theaters during the season. The director had fond memories from his childhood where he and his siblings would perform Hanukkah plays for their family. He invited local Jewish writers to contribute a memory piece of their own. What better story than the one of Ryan's Stand? It was like a modern telling of the Hanukkah story, where the Maccabees resisted pressure to conform. Opening night, Ryan and I were excited to see his story told on stage. My piece was set to close the show. I was in the lobby with Ryan and my other boys. Now, my son Spencer is a master practical joker. He wouldn't just try to scare me. He would try to cause cardiac arrest. So when he said, "Mrs. Hanson is here," which was precisely the kind of stunt he liked to pull, my heart jumped out of my chest. "That's not funny," I responded. "No, really, Miss Hanson is here." In a sea of people who looked like they were about to enter a Henny Youngman show somewhere in the Borscht Belt, here stands Miss Hanson, a Baptist church choir director. Now try to imagine going out for a night at the theater to discover you're not only a character in the play, but the antagonist. And although I used no names, I was the playwright, and the piece had portions of our email exchanges in it. I did the only thing a mature adult could do. I panicked, frantically running circles around the lobby, muttering, "Why does this kind of shit always happen to me?" I randomly grabbed the other writers who crossed my disordered path, seeking some wisdom as to what I may have done in a past or present life that makes the universe want to kick my ass. And they only offered their amusement and gratitude that it was happening to me and not them. I finally did the only thing I thought I could do, which was to tell Miss Hanson what was about to happen. I opened with, "Miss Hanson, you're gonna hate me." And she said, "Oh dear, I could never hate you." And I said, "Oh, you're gonna hate me." And I asked her what made her show up at this show. And she said she was intrigued by the PR because the description of the play said it was to evoke the pageantry of the artistic director's childhood performances for his family. Of course, pageantry and childhood performance is where this woman lived and breathed. I explained everything before we entered the theater, but I sensed she really wasn't getting it. What was supposed to be a night of proud anticipation became an evening of slow, torturous dread for me and Ryan. We held hands all night with equally sweaty palms. I spent the whole evening staring at the back of her head. And as my piece closed the show and the lights went down and then up again, Miss Hanson, who sat through the entire play, was gone. Feeling horrible, not about the story, but about the way she encountered it, I sent Ryan to school with a beautiful poinsettia plant for her. Years later, my youngest son, Luke, was in her class. She said to him, "I don't know what your mother put in that plant, but it just lives and lives." There's only one explanation. It's a Hanukkah miracle. Like the everlasting life in the temple that burned bright long beyond the allotted oil, the poinsettia lives on to spite me.
Stacey, with preaching to the choir director, it was as wonderful to hear it this time as it was the first time. Thank you so much for coming back to tell it again.
My pleasure.
Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe is an annual show by TC Jewfolk. The show will always be in June, and information about the show will always go to our email list first. So go to bit.ly/tcj-newsletter and sign up for our email list to be the first to know about show dates, calls for auditions, cast announcements, and when tickets go on sale. That's bit.ly/tcj-newsletter. See you next time for the next episode of Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe. The Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Episodes are edited by me, and the show is produced by Galit Breen. Theme music for the episode provided by The Long Honeymoon. You can find them at thelonghoneymoon.com. To learn more about the Jewfolk Podcast Network, go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast.